Hi everyone, welcome to Football and Finance, episode 3 with Joseph and Nash. Last week we obviously talked about our favourite guy, Bukayo Saka, and his Nando's sauce. Football regulators, what does that mean for football? This week we've got another 3 topics for you. One is kind of talking about this multi-club ownership structure. What does it mean financially? How does it impact football? What are the challenges? What are the benefits? Our second topic is obviously massive in the news. Germany moving from Adidas to Nike. So like 2 very synonymous brands after nearly 3 to 4 decades. What does that mean financially? Why is it now hitting the political spectrum in Germany? Why is it of such interest? What does it mean long term for Nike and for Adidas? And then finally going into that kind of international friendlies, obviously England off the back of a loss and a draw, and the story around Leon Bailey in Jamaica, the kind of international friendlies, what does it mean? What are the financial implications for various nations across all kind of spectrums, whether you're the kind of top tier nations or you're the traditional minnows? So before we kind of dive into it, Nash, how was the weekend? How's the week?
Good weekend. Enjoyed the Easter holidays with family, food, friends. Usual stuff that people do around Easter. Took a couple of days off, so ready to go for the podcast though.
Managed to catch a Chelsea game?
Nah, I think I was driving back from Cornwall, and I'm glad I missed it. To be honest, I can't be watching that trash anymore. It hurts my soul.
Hurts my soul. I think I missed it for a different reason to you. My kind of thing was, it was one of those I thought we'd win, expected victory, deep bubble watching, thought it'd be 3-2, 2-1, 1-0. And when I saw the red card, I was like, this is a wrap. Game's going to get absolutely closed out, big scoreline. And obviously got the notification on the Apple Watch, draw, and Chelsea draw against 10-man Burnley. And I was like, damn, we really are that bad right now. But I guess it was that if you have no expectations, there's no disappointment. So I think that's what I'm going into with the last 9 or so games left of the season.
Yeah.
But talking about Chelsea, right, it takes us into that kind of our first topic about multi-club ownership. They're not pioneers of the multi-club ownership model. They are kind of initial early adopters across the big nations. So I think the first question I'd ask you, who do you think are the first pioneers or creators or inceptors of the multi-club ownership model?
I don't know if they're the first, but the one I see with the biggest brand in that kind of multi-club ownership is the Red Bull, the RB model that you'll see, Salzburg, Leipzig, across various continents. So yeah, is it them?
Yeah, no, they actually are. I think there probably are other successful ones at a more kind of micro scale, but at a macro level, they were the first organization, obviously the energy drink and kind of owning that German and Austrian club and what they've been able to do with both of them in what is kind of a short period of time. But I think what that has led to is loads of other organizations adopting that kind of multi-club ownership model, and the kind of numbers or the key numbers that I kind of want to leave you with to kind of show how exponentially it's increasing is back in 2012, there were 38 clubs that were part of like a multi-club framework, and now there's about 250 in 2023. So there clearly is more and more adopters of this at various levels and at various scales. And I think, like, before I get your opinions, I think it's probably best to level set the explanation of what the definitions of multi-club ownership and multi-club investment, because often I've seen the two used interchangeably, and there are links, but there are clear distinctions between the two. So like a multi-club ownership would be like the RB example that you kind of cited, right? So in that example, an agent, an entity, an owner, an investor, whatever you want to kind of term that as, exerts control and influence over multiple clubs, so essentially more than one club. And then when you look at the multi-club investment, the party has investment interests in like more than one club, and they don't necessarily exert control or influence. So like a good example of that would be like when Chelsea, the previous owner, Roman, RIP, owned part of CSK Moscow. So obviously he exerted pressure of Chelsea, but had business investments and dealings with CSK Moscow, both to an extent when the two clubs meet, create conflicts of interest. But I thought it was probably best to kind of explain the two for our viewers who may not be familiar. What are your thoughts? Tell me. Is it going to save football, destroy football? Are you on the fence?
So I'm all about the Benjamins and the money and the real hard talk. So to me, it makes financial sense. I think I'm looking at a couple of figures around the Red Bull team or brand or multi-club ownership, and a couple of the teams that they bought are now worth 10x what they bought. So I think they bought the Red Bulls in New York, or where is it? Yeah, for 2.5 mil. It's now 25 mil. 25 mil. It's now worth close to 300 mil. Like, so people are, and that to me, and this is what my biggest point is, that buying in these markets which are going to establish themselves in future to come makes sense from a global brand reach and fans perspective, because you are getting into these markets when they're cheap. If you do this 10, 15, 20 years later, like the numbers saying, you're going to be paying 10x, 20x for the same thing you could have bought earlier. And you're growing your fan base for your primary club. I think RB maybe doesn't have, kind of has the primary club, but maybe Man City, the Man City model, which everything is like, it's been modeled on Man City. Where they've got the colors, sky blue kit, they've got the emblem. City is in every name. It's like Mumbai City, Melbourne, is it Melbourne City? Like they've all got these different city groups. So from that perspective, I think that's going to be a financial win for anybody who's going for these multi-club ownerships. What Man City also got, I think they got $900 million, from Puma, and for their sponsorship when their kit deal came up. And it's like, if I'm Puma, I'm obviously thinking, well, yes, I can sponsor Man City. Great, they're in this particular market. Man City aren't like Man United historically to have that global reach, but now they do have the global reach when they've got all these different teams, or like satellite teams in different continents. So it makes sense as to why they get 900 million over 10 years or something for a kick deal. So from that perspective, there's a few other kind of tinier bits in terms of like shared services. So your IT, your legal, your finance team, you can all bring in. It does get maybe a little bit complicated. If anybody who knows about global companies, when you're thinking of all these different entities and how they might interact, you've got to think about all your taxes, what you're going to do, what you can do if you have a legal conflict, where these different rules apply. But there's global companies, and the biggest companies are global companies. So there's clever people you can pay to work it out. So from a football perspective, and he said the numbers going up, I don't think you will see a situation where, or the biggest risk is where there's a conflict of interest, clashing interest, where the clubs are in the same market, and essentially you're not gaining market share. You're actually just taking it from somewhere else.
It from one place.
Exactly. So I think that from a finance perspective, I'm for it. If I was director of finance at one of these teams, and somebody talks about an opportunity to do that, I'd be like, okay, let's try and do something. It just kind of, it's what other large corporations and organizations have done. So why wouldn't football clubs, which, as we know, has just got seems like an endless pot of money, isn't it? So yeah, those are my initial thoughts. What about your thoughts on the finance?
So I think there's kind of two ways to think about it, right? There's the traditional kind of perception about multi-club ownership and why they exist and the benefits they provide. So like some of which you kind of touched upon when you talked about the kind of RB Leipzig and the Red Bull model. So like there's a kind of view around financial investment and what it does in terms of, you've now got undervalued clubs in non-traditional, less established leagues that are now more lucrative or more attainable by rich investors. So you could just say it's like a rich investor picking off clubs in Africa, Portugal, that are just Portugal, Africa, South America, that are not necessarily valued at the same scale as your big five leagues, hence why you can't buy Manchester United and Atletico Madrid. You've then obviously got the argument that's put forward off the back of COVID, where I think all industries across the world globally were affected. Football was affected across the pyramid, from the grassroots to the pro game to the elite and the international. But some of the clubs much lower down the pyramid across different jurisdictions and different continents were affected worse than others. So invariably, it's made buying a Bolivian and an Argentinian club maybe being undervalued or devalued because of COVID. It's made them more attractive for international investors. And then I think there's also this kind of argument that was put forward by I think his name's Rob Edwards, or he's about to become the head or international sporting director of Liverpool, about needing to remain competitive. So clubs are considering buying multiple clubs across various leagues to remain competitive as an investment and expanding their current football portfolio. So I guess there's those lenses, and then for me there's the kind of ones where I tend to play, and as maybe as a cynic, I tend to believe a bit more. I'd call them kind of the non-traditional explanation for multi-club ownership. So I kind of feel they're a new form of international scouting, really. Like you think about Football Manager back in the day, you're looking for wonder kids, searching Santos, Sao Paulo, Palmeiras, Botafogo, all those teams for any kid that's got wonder kid and buying them on the cheap. Now, if you own those clubs, you've already kind of got them in your system. It becomes a bit techie when you then obviously try to sell the players in your own both clubs, a la Man City, like selling Savio, the Brazilian from Girona. That becomes a bit messy, and that's something else we can go into later. But it becomes a way of international scouting. And I think a lot of clubs have looked at how the Portuguese leagues, at Benfica, Porto, Sporting, Braga, have mined South America in a different way, whereby they're able to kind of like, it's like with houses, they're buying and they're flipping for the maddest profit. Whether or not those players go on to be good, you're buying for 8 million. Just ask Chelsea what Benfica bought Hernandez for X, however million it was, and then sold him on within the same year for over 100. So I think there's clubs obviously trying to tap into that. And there's almost this thing about I call it like a proxy academy. So it may be where kind of Chelsea are playing, where they're saying, actually, if you look at our current academy players, both in terms of the academy and players that have come through the system, and academy players in terms of players maybe under 18 or under 20 that you may have bought from other clubs, the current loan system doesn't work effectively for them to be able on a consistent basis to churn out the quality of players, either to go in the first team or to be sold. So if you look at Chelsea's loan army that we used to have, like 1,000,001 people on loan, how many people actually succeeded from that mechanism? Mason Mount, Fikayo Tomori, Reece James. But for every 3 of those, there were like 15. Oh, I forgot Tammy Abraham. For every 4 of those, they're like 15 or 20. They're like Billy Gilmore's, all these other guys that are just, you hear when Chelsea play Bradford, he was in Chelsea's books. A lot of those. So buying clubs like Strasbourg, like Chelsea have done, where they deem the quality of the league to be a good kind of ground or standing ground for young players to kind of develop. And they can also kind of have some level of say in the amount of games. So I'm sure the senior leadership and the footballing side are probably speaking to Patrick Vieira about how he's using Andre Santos, all these type of players to make sure that they're getting the minutes that they kind of deserve. So there's that component. And then sorry, what are you going to say?
Okay.
No, what are you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, the kind of talent pipeline development and academy, they're just that's I think that's an obvious bet, and it's something you can sell to parents here as well in the UK. Like everybody wants to make it to the Premier League, but almost like if you're not going to you're going to have a professional's career. Might not be here, it might be in Austria, it might be in Nordic country, it might be in the Americas, it might be wherever, and that's another thing you can tell your talent here, which is a bigger sell than if you've not got those satellites set up.
Yep.
And you can always be bought back as well. Like, it just allows for an easier exchange. It's like back in the good old EU days, free movement, isn't it? It's the free movement is what people, that was the biggest advantage of it. And that's kind of what it almost creates, that easily of swapping pieces and putting them in places where you want them.
But one of the things I used to think, and I know it's been addressed recently by the changing, the kind of the formula around homegrown players that the FA and the Premier League had to establish to enable the Premier League to churn out English players, is I kind of felt at the time, this was a couple of years ago, and it's obviously football's moved on, the laws have moved on around those kind of homegrown players, and I think it's like what, the GBE, the acronym of all of the different players you needed to hold that were English or British trained, etc. I used to see the actual vision around multi-club ownership as a way to kind of circumvent that, because you going back to Football Manager, because I guess there's a lot of the stuff that happens in football resonates in what is just actually a game, about the ability to pass the Home Office qualifications to actually get a work permit. Yeah. And when you start to think about countries like the links, colonial links between Portugal and South America, etc., and the ability for those individuals to gain work permits, permanent right to work and stuff, it almost becomes a way where if you own multiple clubs back then or a couple of years ago, you could kind of game the system, because essentially people could be like, oh, you got this really good Argentinian or Peruvian player. We need him at Man City. He's not going to get past the Home Office assessment right now. But if we send him to Braga or we send him to whatever, Strasbourg, 2 years in France, like plays 30 games a season, 90 games over the 3 years, he'll still only be 21.
Gets a cap.
Gets 4 caps against like freaking not even Monterrey. That's I don't know country. I know that's
Montenegro or something.
Yeah, Montenegro, like comes on for the last 6 minutes or whatever it was. Then suddenly he passes the UK border
criteria, the stress test.
Criteria. Invariably, obviously, that now has changed, because I think they've scrapped the formula they were using. So, but that was previously a way that I saw people kind of trying to circumnavigate the homegrown status and the way we were trying to kind of protect the league. But I think the thing for me now is I kind of feel like the reason, and this goes back to the conversation we were having last week about like commercial rights and PSG and Liga and McDonald's and the New Deal, is the fact that some of these, for want of a better word, not primary top leagues, basically outside the top 5 leagues, are now starting to negotiate quite large TV rights in Portugal, in all these other leagues, now brings them to play in a way where they actually become good financial vessels for investment, but also a kind of a talent ground for your young players. So you're seeing now that they're showing more of the Argentinian leagues across the world, and not just Boca and the Copa Libertadores. That's now having a resound income where they're becoming more attractive propositions. And also, I think governments also becoming more receptive. So I think Argentina have expressed, so Todd Bowley and Bedad Igbari, I think Argentinian president, expressed an interest in more foreign investment, and football was one of the opportunities that he kind of put on the table. But invariably, Chelsea will not be buying Boca or River Plate. It will be one of the lesser of those two mighty giants within, lesser clubs within the league, not those two mighty giants. But that's kind of how I kind of see it. But it's hard because more clubs are doing it. And the question then becomes, if you don't do it, does that create does that put you at a competitive disadvantage whereby you go?
I think it does put you going back to my previous point, but then there'll become a time when like you're so far behind that you can't do it anymore, or if you do it, you pay a premium. Like the satellites will be bought up. There'll be just a couple left. Do you know what I mean? Like there's only a finite number of teams in what will be like leagues around the world. So I think you even the teams who aren't in the traditional top 6 are starting to do it. You know, we've seen the Watford model. Who are they connected to in Italy? They've had players.
They're ruining all the clubs, though. They're ruining all the clubs. Watford, done. Udinese, done. They're a cautionary tale of like when multi-club ownership, like all of you get. I was going to talk about it, actually. It's good you talk about that Watford example, because like one of the most interesting angles I'd seen was multi-club ownership was in the FT. There was a good article about it. It was saying how, and this goes back to sometimes how when you and I talk and conversate with other people about football, where I say, strip the emotion out of it and stop looking at it as sport. Look at it as a business. because of the owners who own them see them as a business as much as there's football, the play, what it means, the impact on the community, right? Multi-club ownership is just, for me, if you look at a casino, Vegas, like Grosvenor Casino, any small casino, it just looks like where you're just playing multiple hands of blackjack or roulette, where you know one's going to pop off and you're going to make some money and you're going to lose on these three, but you're trying to keep your portfolio. It just seems to some degree some form of gambling, because if you think about like the Man City network of 11 clubs, I'm not saying if Melbourne City or Mumbai City or New York City win the league, it's equitable to Man City winning the Premier League in terms of money. But if you're looking at it from a balanced portfolio, the biggest adverse concern to any owner is relegation, because that's instant. You lose money, probably have to let quite a lot of people go, massive reduction in your revenue streams, etc., all that type of things, right? So if you have a portfolio of which you have a flagship crown jewel, Man City, you know they're never going to get relegated unless they don't bust 116 complaint, whatever charge case. They're like your flagship, and you have all these others that sit in the pyramid. New York City, okay, they didn't win the MLS Cup. Mumbai City get relegated, or Melbourne. You kind of you still end up like as a portfolio level, kind of good.
Yeah, it's hedging.
Yeah, literally, and that's why sometimes I think when you look at the billionaires and the PE firms and hedge funds that own football clubs, I think they almost see it the way they see the rest of their business portfolio, and that's one of the things that as fans and people that are kind of staunch with the love of their clubs, that's not what fans want to hear and want to see, especially when you're not the top of that food chain, because then you take the least risks with those ones and the rest are a bit like that's the golden egg that you're trying to
and that's what I'm saying for fans who are out there. And a lot of the time some of these multi-club owners are going after people who are on the brink, like brink financially. I think there was not Barnsley, but it might have been Barnsley. I think they're part of a multi-club ownership, and they were like operating a 4 million loss there every year. So they was like, oh, we need to do something. And they saw this opportunity, and you know, and I even think the Watford owner, I think he bought the club for not very much. I think he paid off 10 million in debt, and then obviously now is doing all the swapsies with his team in Italy.
Players.
With the players in Italy. So it can feel like some of these smaller satellites are kind of being bullied into these situations, but that's kind of how a lot of the free market works. Like in terms of like, you know, if Coke or Pepsi, they'll buy something that's like up and coming to hedge their brand, like a new water, like vitamin water of 50 cents or somebody. Do you know what I mean? Like it'll be. They're looking at the market thinking, okay, we're not currently in this market. How do we get in there? How do we hedge against what our core brand is? So our core brand is, you know, the Coke, which is, people like might say it's unhealthy. So let's go for a vitamin water, which is not going to be like huge amounts of money so that's the way I see it. For fans, they're going to struggle when they see their best players being shipped to a new league. But you might have then the offset that is that you actually have an affiliation with that brand now. So if you see your player get sold from Mumbai City to Man City, like at least like it's not going to someone who you have no connection with. Yeah. So you might that might be your second team, you know, and so you're not feeling as difficult. And I think these leagues have a lot to catch up on. I think they're ultimately, you will always have your crown jewel that will be in one of the top 5 leagues, and the rest will be kind of glad for the investment, for the support, and for the financial backing. Honestly, I think it's a win-win for you as the bigger club, because you have just now become so much more marketable, and your brand is bigger in all these different regions. And foreign investment, and I think maybe we'll come on to foreign investment now with the new Nike deal with Germany that's coming up. Foreign investment just makes sense to these other corporations. So we're like, oh yeah, I currently don't have Red Bull popping in South America. Let me go there. Like it makes sense. But yeah, speaking of foreign investment, we've got
crown jewels
and the crown jewels. We've got Germany, who've been
losing in the crown jewel.
If they've been associated with Adidas, I think they were supplying their football boots in like the 50s or something like that. And then their shirts since the 70s, 80s. They're moving away from Adidas in 2027, I believe. And Nike made an offer they couldn't refuse. And I really wanted to context this with, like, I think we were speaking before, and I was trying to tell you how big Nike is compared to everyone else. Yeah, Nike is huge. So it's part of the Fortune 500. It's number 9. Now I need to double check, but Adidas, they're not even on it. They're not even on the Fortune 500. I don't know if they're listed on that particular exchange, but they're not on it. Yeah. Then if you just go revenue, they're double their revenue. Nike does 50 billion. Yeah. 50 billion. Adidas is doing 23 billion. Yeah. So, and that's not even profits, because I don't know what the operating costs are going to be like. One, also, you think of just like market share. So market share just for shoes, I looked it up, 66%. Nike has 66% of shoes, of trainers. Sneakers. That's mad.
Yeah, I was quite surprised by that, because I was thinking one company, one sports and shoe apparel
has bigger than everyone else
of the market. Like that number in itself. But the thing that you said, actually, when I heard it, right, I was thinking of the Travis Scott, the Drake song "Sicko Mode," where he says "Checks over stripes," and I was just like, I actually felt quite bad for Adidas, because I think, like, you were talking about crown jewels, and you spoke on, I think on our first podcast, you talk about like brands that are synonymous with each other, and like for the longest that I've been watching football, Germany's always been the three stripes. It's always been Adidas. It's one of those that, like, you recognize, you see any kit through the years, they take off the brand and you're like, that's a Germany kit. Like, you see, maybe if they take off a color and the brand, you know that's the Germany kit. And for Adidas, I just feel losing Germany as a main international sponsor, going into a home tournament as well. So the Euros are in Germany in the summer, right? Like,
they'll still be wearing Adidas in though, but they're not wearing after that. But
it's still a bit awkward. Like, so I read something about how, like, Germany are training, like, you know how the international teams have their bases for the tournament, right? So Germany are training out Adidas. That's kind of awkward. It's like you break up with your girlfriend, but you're still living with her for the next 2 years, and then you're like, and then she knows you're leaving to go to another girl.
You know what it's like? You break up with a girlfriend who you've got, but you've got a mortgage that's lasting for 2 years, and you've seen the interest rate, so you know that you have to stay with her, and everybody has to keep the peace, because nobody has no financial lawsuit. So then you have to make it work. They got to.
And when I look at that, I'm kind of like, what happened? Because I was really interested in, like, how did Nike come from? What was it about Nike's offer? And when I started to kind of unpick it, I think what's really interesting is a lot of the things, and maybe this is, I wouldn't say it's financial negligence, because I'm sure like Adidas have people that are way smarter than you and I working for them and stuff across all their business, is a lot of the things I read said that Adidas never thought any competitor organization would come in with an offer that large. Like, that was kind of the general consensus, which kind of like blew my mind.
I'm thinking with that is that Nike were like, it's a win-win. If we make a ridiculous offer, we can afford it, yeah? And then we get the huge, we're in this market.
It's double the current Adidas.
And then what you also, if they match it, then they don't have the resources that Nike has to be able to spend on the French kit sponsor, the English kit when it comes up. So it's like you're forcing their hand, and then so you're like, even just us talking about it and the fact that it popped off in Germany and politicians are talking about it, chancellors, all this kind of thing. It's just more like press for Nike, isn't it? It's more exposure for how dominant Nike is. And that's, to me, is a stroke of genius. Even if you can say that they overpaid, which maybe some might argue.
Yeah, that argument about overpayment, right? I guess the thing is, you look at houses, right? When people say overpay, the value of something is what it means to the person that's buying it. Like, if Nike were willing to pay 200 million a year or 200 million for the Germany kit deal, etc., for 4 years, how many years it is, like, Adidas can call that a gross overpay. Germans can call it, speculators can call it an overpay. But that is what Nike had put aside to spend on it. That's a bargain for them. If their budget was actually 200 million, they've saved 50%. And I think this like thing about what's quite interesting. I think like maybe Adidas we've talked about the fact they thought that nobody would bid. But also, one thing that was quite interesting is they thought that the fact that Germany had been unsuccessful over the last recent years, like across major tournaments, would make it a less attractive proposition. And therefore, it would be kind of uncompetitive, or not uncompetitive, but they were kind of in the driving seat, etc. And it's quite interesting because I watched a video with something similar. It was the Adidas guy who went to LeBron James's house when he was like about to go into the NBA, and they knew he was going to be the guy, right? And it seems they haven't learned. Obviously, it's two different people, two different continents, but they haven't that mentality of LeBron James is a guy from the projects, family, super poor. I'm going to put this stuff on the table with 10 million or however much it was. I think it was 10 million. And this kid from the projects, of course, he'll accept it and he'll be grateful. Rather than actually the way LeBron saw it was like, if Adidas are willing to put 10 mil on the table, what would Reebok and Nike give me? So you hold your 10 mil check. I'm going to take everybody else. And it's kind of the same mentality when you look at it 20, exactly nearly 20 years later. So LeBron's been in the league 20 years. Adidas are repeating the same thing where they're like, Germany, down in the dumps, the German fan base are losing, kind of sacked their coaches, everybody sacked coaches. They were terrible at the World Cup, terrible at the Euros, going nowhere fast, no striker, just Kai Havertz and all these other like bit part players. We'll get this deal locked down for 40 or 50 and maybe even extend it. And then suddenly Nike are like, you know what? If we take this from Adidas, what message does it send? And I think the message it sends loud and clear is no brand and no organization are forever. Like literally, no matter how you could have been AJ with Under Armour, Nike could come in tomorrow and be like 100 mil. Like Steph Curry with Under Armour. No partnership between athlete, organization, and an external organization is for life. In the way that when we grew up, Michael Jordan was Nike from the day he entered the league till the day he retired, to even now just chilling as an owner of a team.
Because he was getting because his deal was so sweet. He was getting 5% or whatever it was on every FJ shoe sold.
I hear that, but I guess the thing is like, even if you go Kobe, then fine. Kobe didn't have that deal, but he was Nike all the way through. Ronaldo has been Nike all the way through, etc. And Messi has been Adidas all the way through. Like you kind of have it in your head that I couldn't imagine Messi in a pair of Adidases. I couldn't imagine Ronaldo in a pair. I couldn't imagine Messi in a pair of Nikes in the Mercurial Vapors. I couldn't imagine like Ronaldo in Predators. Like they're just, it's not a thing. But now Nike actually changing the dynamics where no brand, an athlete or organization are forever kind of pairing.
I agree with like Adidas took Germany for granted, obviously with the rich history of the founders of Germany. I'm not sure we're going to mention their ties and links to, you know, some anti-Semitic group that caused a couple of world wars, but we'll leave that one there. But the thing I want to focus on is that they just said money talks, and the German FA, they couldn't. It would be financially irresponsible for them to be like, oh, you know, but we're still with our girlfriend. You know, she's really nice. When Beyonce just walked in the room, like, they had to invest in grassroots. They want to invest in their technical facilities. They want to invest in coaches. Like that money will do so much more. And I think it again attracts bigger brands. Like money attracts money. So when you're coming to, and we'll talk about friendlies, when you're coming to sell your sponsorship, your broadcasting rights for friendlies and other sponsorship deals, and you say, yeah, but we've got Nike, so it makes sense to do it. People were getting angry. I said, talked about the politicians. To me, it's a similar to the kind of the populist conversations that were happening last week with the England team and their kit deal, where people are just jumping on football because football is for the common man. So everyone was like getting kind of super outraged about it. Like, how could Germany walk away from Adidas for money? And it's like, how could Adidas make a second class deal? Like, how could they lowball them that much and think that not do your homework, not do your research, not find out what your competitors are doing, and just rely on like trust, goodwill for you to get a deal done in this situation. So I think for me, like, it's Adidas's fault. I don't think the German FA did anything wrong. I think that then no one's going to have sympathy for Adidas because they're still like a $1 billion company. And
what's quite
outside of Germany anyway.
Yeah, outside of Germany. But I think what's quite like interesting to kind of think about is that thing you were talking about around the grassroots, because I guess people are focusing on like plastic money. I know, like when Donnarumma left PSG, when PSG played AC Milan, they all threw like paper notes on the floor, like went for the money. And I know that there's been a similar type of reception in Germany, obviously switching over to Nike. But I think the thing that you talked about that often gets understated is, yes, it is double the current deal, but it's what did Nike, and this is probably maybe what Nike do better than other organizations within the sporting realm. They understand, not necessarily the market, that's what you should do as any business owner or any person trying to be successful in your area, but they actually understand the business behind the business. So in terms of understanding from a grassroots perspective, if you look at German grassroots, I think there's something like just under 25,000 clubs. Like, there's over 2 million people playing. Like, so this is their version of Sunday League through this league system. There's over 50,000 referees. That's all paid for by them, right? That extra 50 million that Nike are promising goes a long way for them to being able to fund that effectively and adequately. Like, we both worked at the FA. We understood like their big challenges around the grassroots, making sure there were quality pitches up and down the country across all the league system, pyramid, pro, amateur.
Just the admin behind it costs money. Like.
Yeah, it costs money. And I think there's almost the emotive side that people link Adidas and Germany to. Actually, the rationale and the business side makes it untenable and unviable. And I kind of feel like when the dust settles, those individuals will kind of see the deal in a different light for what it is. But then they'll also cast an eye on Adidas in terms of why were they supposedly, quote unquote, asleep at the wheel to let that even happen in the first place. And I think the worrying thing for Adidas now is, like you talked about at the top, the French one's up for grabs. Like that one's coming up. Like, they're not going to get the French one because I just don't like. They can't forget the money from one example. France have been Adidas in the past, but what that French team stands for, I think they're going to want to stand for a brand where they're seen to be at the forefront of sporting apparel, and Adidas will almost have to give something that it's never given away to lure that type of. It's kind of like when you're trying to attract a player, right? And he has an option between Barcelona and Atletico Madrid. You almost have to offer them something that you have never offered before, or is just like money can't buy level to encourage them to come with you. And I guess the thing now is, like, with all these deals up in the air, my head's not like, unlucky Adidas, da, da, da. Mine is more like, where else will Nike take Adidas's food? Like, not just in football now. So just taking a step back, they compete in basketball, ice hockey, NFL. Where else do they take their food?
And like, Nike are just so dominant, and that's why I started at the top to say Nike are ruthless. They are at the forefront of like sport technology, always looking to put their best foot forward and be way better than the competition. They're not happy being first. They're like happy. They're only happy if they're number one and they're crushing everyone else. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is crazy. So one of the things that I was thinking was like, okay, because another, like, people were making analogy of like, oh, what about, when England was sponsored by Umbro, people were upset. Umbro being kind of a British brand. Umbro, yeah, they're not at the forefront of.
Buy Umbro anyway.
Everybody was happy when England left. But at that time, Umbro was owned by Nike. It only sold it like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
That's so mad. Like, I'm telling you, Nike is huge. They were when England was sponsored by Umbro, were making and sponsoring the kit. Nike had them like just a little thing just to toy with. Do you know what I mean? And they divested it, and it's gone now. But they're huge, and I think that with that argument of patriotism and nationalism, I think that Adidas overly relied upon just doesn't make sense, because there's only a few sporting manufacturers. I'm from Jamaica. Jamaica ain't got no kind of big sporting brand that they're going to be able to put on all of their kit. And would you say to these clubs in the Caribbean or bigger markets like the Nigeria team or the India team, like where there's huge populations in South America and all those places, like you're not going to expect them just to have to use just their own brand, even if it is kind of they've been having them for a long period of time. So Nike, they're just going to continue. I don't know who's going to take down Goliath, because they're just seriously on their job when it comes to outmaneuvering the competition. It like in this particular way, and they got so much. They can actually take risks now, which maybe other organizations just can't do.
I just think that thing for. I think the thing for Nike is the idea of they can take risks because first of all, they have that mindset to take risks, but they also have the capital, the collateral, and the cushion to be able to take those risks. And whether they pay out, great. And if they don't pay out, it was just one of those opportunities they were chasing. But I do think now, I think that's kind of, you get those moments in time where something, after an action or an activity, the ripple and the effect it has on an industry, not just a sector, it's never the same. I think what this does spell is like at every major juncture across any sport now, Adidas is going to have to do things differently. So if there's an NBA player who is coming into the league about to get a trainer deal, they may have to give him like a guarantee up front of 10 iterations of his sneakers, things like that. They don't even offer to their current athletes on their books to keep them.
Then I think Nike then will just evolve even more. So my thinking is like, how Nike sponsors the NBA kits, like every kit in the NBA is Nike. I can see Nike just doing something crazy with FIFA or UEFA and being like, okay, UEFA, we'll give you, a couple bill for all these European clubs that are affiliated to, but they're all wearing Nike kit. Say none. Do you know what I mean? Like I can see them that they're at that level to do it. Adidas can't do that. It's actually ridiculous, and I'm saying it as like a pipe dream that's out there. But if anybody was to do it, it's going to be Nike.
And even when you take a look at some, for example, I think a couple of weeks ago, they had all their kit releases of the international teams going into major tournament window. Obviously, Nigeria kit was popping off again. Fourth iteration still banging. You're seeing all like Croatia, all the kits that they're kind of rolling out, and you're seeing like that kind of brand and fanfare around each kit. It's almost like something in the calendar now. Like I look forward to seeing the new Nigerian kit every year, what the training kits look like, etc. So it's almost a kind of like an established moment in time that people want to take advantage of. But I think that then starts to lend itself to the question that if you've got the Nike backing, and then we start to look at where international clubs are going, does this enable those international clubs, or how does that impact the international clubs in terms of the friendlies they organize? So like we obviously saw that story about Leon Bailey, like you're obviously Jamaican heritage, and like we saw Leon Bailey obviously talking a little bit about Jamaican Football Federation, some of the financial challenges and some of the things he's actually kept on the wraps, really. And in terms of he could have exposed them years ago or a while back, and he's now only talking. So if they were Nike sponsored, would that change the dynamics, or would that money get chopped or skimmed off a little bit more than it already may do? I don't know, but what do you think?
I guess that gave me thought actually, and I'll maybe look into this because Puma has a really big following in Jamaica. I'm not sure if it sponsors the national kit, but like you've seen like Usain Bolt be wearing it in athletics. So I imagine if that was a similar trend where you saw Jamaica going to another athletics apparel for all their athletes in the next Olympics, would we feel the same? Like Puma in Jamaica, it's not as synonymous as Adidas and German football, but in the athletics game, it is big. But yeah, friendlies wise, I think with the way that they're currently set up, Nike being a sponsor of it, it is going to increase other sponsors to come along and join the ride. There's not, when I was looking into it in terms of like actually how the like friendlies are make money. Remember, it's kind of independent of UEFA, FIFA. It's not their tournament. So right now, the football side, yeah, you've got playing young players, new players, chemistry. You've got the points rankings. What nobody really, who really wants to be number. I think Belgium were number one in the world for ages, and
one nothing
in one nothing. So I get like nobody really cares about it, but and the money can be big for a couple of and it's bigger than, it's not what you may think. Who gets the money? Like for instance, USA, Mexico, yeah, I think they have a rolling international friendly every year. You know why? Because USA has an exponential growing Latino population and Mexican population. So a lot of these Latino national teams and Hispanic teams can demand top dollar for you to come and play in America because they know that they're going to fill out the stadium. You're going to get domestic rights in their country is going to pop off for them. They're also going to be at the international rights in those, other non-domestic markets for them. So if you're Mexico and you might be, getting the kind of South American markets that are connected, and they know that the ticket sales are going to go through the roof for that particular event. And that's why when you see, like, who do England play? England play like in their friendlies. They play the big teams who they know that can draw crowds, or they'll play teams like Jamaica, Nigeria, Poland, diasporic populations who they know they're going to bring in they're going to bring in like the level of not competitive, but there'll be huge fans join to the game. It will kind of almost likely to be a sellout. Like so they
is that so obviously what you're saying is completely right, but the only thing they also do is the friendlies during tournament year are usually tailored to the clubs that they're trying to, that the nations they're going to come up against in terms of the style of it. So yeah, there is
years you're like, let me get this bread. Yeah. Tournament years, you're like, let me prepare the team.
But the thing is also, when we talk about like these friendlies, right? I always feel like growing up, I don't know how you felt, but when I was a teenager, like I only ever saw Brazil on the TV during the World Cup, right? They didn't really play European sides, maybe like Spain and France, but they didn't really turn up to play like England and Wales and all this type of stuff. And I almost feel like when you think about friendly construction, the fact that you can see Brazil really every 2 years in the UK or within Europe, continental Europe, that kind of fanfare of which Brazilian team am I going to see has kind of gone down for me personally. And I know, like, when we look at some of the stadium attendances, when they talk about it's a sellout crowd at Wembley, it's a sellout crowd at Cardiff or whatever stadium, Stade de France or wherever they're playing with Bernabeu, the first thing that always goes into my head, and even when I talk about it with like friends like that are big into football, colleagues, is when they talk about the total attendance number, the first thing that I always say is how many of those tickets are comp? And so for those that listening, like comp as in complimentaries, and they're issued and given for free at no charge. How many of those tickets are comp? How many of those tickets are at cost, where like the stadium, the federation aren't losing or making any money, but it's just covering their cost? How many actually pure profit, etc.? Those are the kind of three ways I look at it.
You've got the corporate boxes and obviously the food on top of that and all that aspect to it.
You always have those, but I do think more and more when you hear like, oh, sellout crowd for England, Moldova, I'm like 79,000, 10,000 of those are comp. In my head, that's that's the number.
Let I kind of kids in Wembley go to a game, Joe. Come on, like
I'm not saying kids shouldn't go, but I'm saying I think the danger is, right, there's this problem, and it's not really a problem because I guess everyone's known about it. When we talk about international football, the non-tournament related international fixtures, right? I think if we were to look at and track the financials behind it, they kind of ebb and flow, and they kind of probably move parallel to the success of the nation. So like when England were terrible, no one wants to go to Wembley. England on the up and up, everyone wants to go. But there's also an additional dynamic, which is based on your opponent, right? No matter how good England are playing freaking
Lithuania
on a Thursday, or Lithuania, right? Like people have to come up from work, all those dynamics, buy a ticket, train ticket, all that type of stuff. There's a point where you can only be as a national side so good for so long. Look at Belgium, had their heyday, #1 for ages now. Like you're seeing them play England, you recognize 2 players on the team sheet, and 2 of them are playing Championship. One of them's been outcast from Chelsea. So I think the question then becomes the financial model around international friendlies. For how long do they remain viable in the current construct? Because we created the Nations League, right? Because friendlies were rubbish, people were just passing caps.
You know that's FIFA's MO to everything. It's like if there's a problem in football, just create more football. Like it don't make sense. Just expand more, play more games. That will make it work. Like come on.
Go to the locksmith, not the locksmith, the armorer, and get him to make more silver trophies.
Yeah,
non-relevant competitions.
Yeah,
but I think people will start to catch up with that though, where I feel there might be like a point where people become domestic football followers, and then they follow the international game in tournament time, and in between they're kind of like Euros, okay, England fan, World Cup, England fan. In between, I'm a Liverpool fan. I'm an Arsenal.
Couple of strategies I think which national federations are doing is, one, if you want to go to the games that are meaningful, you have to go to these games because of the point system that you need in order to get yourself to a World Cup semi-final if England get there. I said if. And then you also then have the friendlies that are played away from Wembley and different locations. So you're bringing in the crowd that usually don't get it. And again, there's a reason why we play Scotland like every other year, because Scotland hate us. Allegedly, we hate Scotland for some reason. So it's kind of that kind of, even if it's a Germany friendly, there's that, beef that consists. So I do think people are still going to go, and I still think they're going to get the rights. I don't know the numbers behind the current broadcasting rights with the Channel 4 deal. Obviously, I know it's the first time that Channel 4 have done it, and it's the first time I think that the what's that competition that you just said, that Mickey Mouse International? Yeah, that's going to be on there as well.
Mate, don't discredit Holland. I think Holland won the first one and Spain won the other. I don't even know. I know Holland won the first one because they beat.
The fact you said you don't even know. So like that, so they're going to, I don't know how much they pay for that bundle, but it's kind of like a new thing that's going to be on mainstream television for a lot more viewers to be able to engage and watching. Now it's not on the paid for subscriptions that you get. So I think there's a couple of ways in which that they're trying to ensure that that model continues to exist. It's difficult because it's just so jam packed, and it does feel like you don't watch football when international week is on, to be honest. It's so dead.
That's how I feel. And I think like the interesting thing is that we've obviously been talking for like 5-10 minutes now about the top level of the international friendly games. We haven't even looked at some of the minnows, because like when you look at and I don't say that disparagingly, I mean like countries that aren't the preeminent international sides, etc. When you start to look at the kind of lower level, right? Not lower level, maybe it's Senegal or Jamaica and Nigeria, etc. You look at, when you go past obviously the diaspora and people who will want to watch these games, where Jamaica will play Mexico at Craven Cottage or something, or like they all used to do back in the day. I think the challenge also for those nations.
Played somebody at West Ham Stadium one time that I went to. Who did they play?
Who? England?
No, Argentina played somebody. They didn't play England. They played like another foreign team in England. I'll interrupt you. Carry on.
No, but when you look at it that way, where they have to make it financially viable for themselves in terms of if Nigeria playing Qatar in Qatar, then obviously everyone's breaded, everyone's quids in. Like when it's not those type of fixtures, there's a danger that those fixtures almost become like Nigeria played Ghana during this international window, right? Massive game, the jollof rice rivalry, loads of different rivalry, loads of historical ties and colonial links between the two countries over time. But when I looked at the Nigeria team, I was like, this person's missing, this person's missing, this person's missing. And the game obviously still matters, right? People still want to win that. But I'm looking at a lot of the players. And the question is like, when they say they're good, huh?
A lot of these players ain't being paid. Well, it's not that they're not being paid. They're being paid nowhere near what they're getting from.
Well, they're not being paid at all. Like the Leon Bailey, right? The article I read said that he paid for every single flight where he'd been to Jamaica. And the thing that's mad about that stat, when you hear it, he's like, he's never got any money from the Jamaican FA, etc. Right? If you think about it, Leon Bailey's like, I think 26 or 25. So if you actually deep it and think about it, how many caps does Leon Bailey have for Jamaica? So he has like close to, I think like something like 30, 40 caps, right? So this guy since like 2018, 19 has been paying his own flights. He basically said that he pays his own flights, keeps his mouth shut. Like that's a reflection of the current friendly model doesn't work outside the big tier countries.
Yeah, so I know that. So for instance, the English FA will pay clubs essentially because they're paying your employer essentially because you're not going to be there to do your work. So they compensate them in a way. The England players do get paid, but they're not. They collect it, but I think since 2004, or maybe 2007, I can't remember. Maybe it's later on, but they've been donating that money to the a football foundation essentially, and that money has been used for to do great things in and outside of football. So, but for the Jamaican FA, they should be essentially guaranteeing money and travel costs and like training facilities from the places that they're visiting, because they rarely will have games at home. They're more likely to go to Jamaica by population size has got one of the biggest diasporas around the world in Canada, America, England, and and the rest of it, and in these other countries. So what you typically need to do is negotiate your travel costs. You negotiate where you're going to be training. You're going to negotiate your domestic rights so that everybody's got at least their expenses covered. Now, allegedly, this is what Jamaican FA is. They said that they did book tickets for Leon Bailey and that he either refused them or whatever. And he said, she said. In Jamaica, they say something like "heart's dead and cow fat," so it just means it's just a long story.
But the thing is that the reason I'm inclined to like believe him, right, and I guess is I look at the example with like Nigerian men, Nigerian women, like the amount of disputes they've had with the federation about unpaid tournament bonuses, and when they won major tournaments, when they've got to the final. There was the issue with the Super Falcons, the women's team at the World Cup, whereby I think FIFA had to come in and give the like playing team and staff physically the check, or say they would all be paid directly, that they wouldn't give it to the federation to then pay them. They knew that wouldn't work. So they're like, here's the actual check. And then 23 of you divide that number, coaches, whatever. And you had the same thing where I think the African Cup of Nations that Nigeria won in 2013, I think the Nigerian billionaire Aliko Dangote paid during the tournament when the players threatened to strike. He actually paid them out of his own money. Bankrolled. He was like, guys, like, obviously, I know you're meant to be getting 50,000 USD a game or whatever it was. I'll pay that. And this is why I think like the friendly model is flawed, but the flaws become more obvious and more apparent the lower the national sides are. So in the England model, it may be papered over the cracks by large commercial deals with Nike, Adidas, Nike, McDonald's, Weetabix, etc. Those big corporate deals, Kia, etc. and the TV rights that you've always kind of alluded to, right? And the fact what you just said, the players, even if they were to get it, give it away because they're earning substantially more at their club. But when you start to get to the Hungaries and you're not a Dominic Soboslai and you're one of these other guys where you're just playing for Stade Bucharest or maybe £8,000 a week, etc., the dynamics are a little bit different, and then you start to see it break out through either players kind of speaking out and or just choosing not to be called up, or debates about how those people are paid. So I guess my concern is, how do you change the international friendly model when you look beyond your traditional top 16 sides? Basically, let me put it this way. How do you change the friendly model when you look outside the big European clubs and the big South American teams? So basically, when I say South America, Brazil and Argentina. So Europe, Brazil and Argentina, how do you change international friendlies to benefit the other 200 countries that are all FIFA signatories, rather than how it just benefits really these 20 sides to a certain degree, but everybody else kind of just get what they get?
And I guess that's what FIFA tried to do with making things meaningful with the Nations Leagues. But then it's like they got the Nations Leagues, but still have the other friendlies. So it just added more football, and it created the Nations League, which was more important, I guess, more important to fans and teams and players, and some of these lower teams as as like a pride to take in, but it still wasn't the same as like a World Cup or a Copa America or European Cup. So it's, to me, I wouldn't be bothered if they went away. But a lot of these federations have signed deals with broadcasters to say you must play a certain amount of international games.
I get that. I just feel like
for the rights to occur. So
I feel like the product, maybe, and I'd be interested to see the data behind it, right? So, like, take 3 different tiered nations, one in the top 10, one in 20 to 30, and then one outside the top 50, and take the last 5 years of data around friendlies. Obviously, maybe excluded for the COVID years because they may not be reflective of the natural current state, but see the data. I'd be surprised if they weren't holding steady and declining with spikes. Because when I look at it now and think about some of the friendlies, like even the Nations League, I think that was kind of also created not just for the nonsense friendlies, but it was to stop teams like gaming the system. I remember like Poland had like some of the best like unbeaten records. They'd have like 13 unbeaten, but they'd play nobody. And Lewandowski was stat padding with like hat tricks against Albania, hat tricks against Kosovo, hat tricks against.
They do have a dynamic system in terms of that ranking. I know I told you I think it's trash, but if you're a lower side and you beat a top side, it's worth more points. If you're a higher multiplier is applied to it. If you're in a in tournament game, it's worth more points. So it can mean a little bit to some of these smaller groups. Like if Jamaica does beat an England 1-0 or gets a draw at Wembley, like the whole nation pops off. Do you know what I mean? So
how they get a draw against England when Leon Bailey has to buy his own train ticket down from Birmingham, not Birmingham, Aston, get a train ticket into Houston and then get a chauffeur-driven car because Jamaica misplaced the train ticket money.
Yeah. What? So do you think we should get rid of them then, just friendlies in general? Or
the thing is, right, it's one of those, and I hate when people do it, and I'm kind of doing it, where you offer critique and don't offer a solution. And I hate when people do it, so I'm annoyed that I'm kind of in that position. But I think the quandary for me is I don't know how that friendly system can work to the benefit financially of all international countries outside of the big ones. Unless it's a smaller nation, like you said, Nigeria playing England at Wembley, Nigeria playing Qatar in Qatar. I don't know how it works to make it viable when Nigeria play Hungary in Lagos. I'm not saying that Hungary, I've ever been to Lagos. I don't know how you make it viable unless actually you do it because it's I don't want to say a loss leader, but you make a loss on it. Like,
that's part of some of the England games, not lost leaders. They're not like 1p beans, but they are advertisements for the new kit.
Yeah,
they are,
maybe
and
that's the answer.
and that's what
It
that might be
serves,
the overall purpose. Do you
yeah,
know
it
what I mean?
serves a purpose. So the game is actually, yeah, and that's true. And maybe that's the way you kind of need to look at it. Maybe like Spain playing all these other nations that aren't necessarily the best nations to play or challenge them is a way for, like, I think they've now started playing in different stadiums. They play in Valencia, they played at Mestalla, the Bernabeu, the Nou Camp, Atletico Madrid, Sevilla Stadium. So maybe it's a way of
US doesn't have a national stadium, so they're always trying to move out.
always
And the issue they have is because of how many Mexicans they're outnumbered, and because it's like if they play Mexico, and because if it's like, what was it? If with where it might be, say it might be in Texas. Most of the people there are not huge soccer fans, but the Hispanic people and the Mexican people in Texas are going to be huge fans. Right. So they might have a home game where it's like 80-90% like away fans. So you need to think about where you need to have again, and I feel like that's similar here. Like there's times when if you have these diaspora games, like you might get kind of a lot of tickets sold in the England's stands, but you'll see people coming with their Nigeria shirt or their Ghana shirt, their Jamaica shirt, their Poland shirt. You know,
they just come to see a game, man. They're not there. It's like when you go to an NBA game and you see someone wearing a different shirt, you've just come to see an NBA game. So you see,
or like the NFL model, isn't it? Like, but they've been at Wembley, they've been at Bayern Munich Stadium, I think, and Tottenham's new stadium. Like every single shirt is there, and the games are not like, I don't think that, with respect to Jacksonville Jaguars, they haven't really been. They had one season where they had a great defense, but outside of that, they haven't been like a top tier team who's playing another top tier team, and it really means something about getting into the playoffs, or it's a playoff game. Like it doesn't happen. So, but eventually, it can morph into something that people do think is meaningful. But for now, it's just vibes. It's just enjoyment. The kids around Wembley get to go to a game for little or nothing. It builds that brand reputation, your connection with the local community. Like, as much as I said that at the beginning, I'm all about the Benjamins. Like, there is that element to it as well. Like, they want to have some form of corporate social responsibility. So, and that's one of the avenues in which you can do it, which doesn't lose you loads amount of money. And the upside is that you're creating these fans, these future fans of England who want to go to Korea in 25 years when you've got a game there, who want to support the team when it's in challenging times, because you're competing for other interests now. These kids have got tablets and iPhones and this virtuality and that, like TikTok and all this kind of stuff. You maybe for these governing bodies is about how do we kind of not rest on our laurels, like we're talking about Nike, and just making sure that we bring in these kind of new sets of supporters. And I guess some of the atmospheres at those games tend to be a little bit more child friendly than going to. We all saw that mess when the Euros was at England and we played Italy, and so those kind of games, there's a completely different atmosphere, and you might not actually want to bring your child to that game or as a first game for them, for their first England memory and all that kind of stuff. So there's a few other sides to it.
And I think that's kind of a good kind of way to round it off and think about it. That, like, when you look at international friendlies, maybe the aim isn't you're always financially profitable. Maybe there's other avenues and other things you're trying to get out of it. You're honoring your commercial deals and your corporate kind of relationships that you have to offer, whether it's the hospitality you're selling and the amount of England games you need to have. You're honoring the amount of kits or amount of times that kit will be worn in home fixtures or away fixtures, or you're just making it more accessible to the community. I think the challenge is there's almost, and we'll probably like end on this kind of tone, is that I almost feel, and maybe I'm wrong, and we'll see what happens, that a lot of football fans are becoming more focused on the league than they are their international teams. Whether it's like you're a Barcelona fan and you care about Barcelona winning La Liga over Madrid than Spain being successful, or you're a Man United fan and you care about Manchester United or Man City winning the treble than England winning the Nations League or the European Cup. You're always a domestic fan first. He switches into kind of national modes during tournaments. And if they lose, you're kind of a bit bugged or annoyed by it, but you kind of get over it. And maybe that's the angle. Like there's the kind of dial of domestic to international is moving more towards the domestic, and the international is just a byproduct, like you said, to fill in our weeks. When they're kind of stat padding the weeks, and even when they stat pad it, we still don't watch it anyway, or you and I don't anyway.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan, but it's been good to catch up on these topics. I think that there's lots to unpack with these. Probably got a few of those sums wrong, so you can at me in the comments if I got anything wrong. But the Football Finance podcast is making its third appearance. I think we're doing all right.
Yeah, I think probably like none of us will ever work at Adidas. You like absolutely destroyed their product.
Adidas, these gangs are not gonna.
It's called it second tier. So any aspirations of working at Adidas now,
the numbers don't lie, bro. So if they thought they were bigger than Nike, then they should have come with bigger money.
But so you can rule Adidas offers as options, and Watford as any kind of footballing roles. I think they call the Kamoli family, so you insert them, and then when we kind of start at the top and start to look at multi-club ownership, I guess we haven't ruled ourselves out for Man City or RB Leipzig or so. Yeah, but it's been good. I think obviously, like you said, third episode, great. Everyone like, share, comment. You can add your comments at whichever one of us it is that annoyed or messed up or had a slip of the tongue. And Nash and I will be back here next week doing the same thing, new topics, new discussion points.
All right. Catch you later.
Bye, everyone.